They ruled 10,000 worlds, and still, they were powerless. The great Zuran Empire, carved in starlight and arrogance, stood still as death crept into its palace. In chambers where warlords had once knelt and planets had begged for mercy, now silence ruled. No music, no ceremony, only the hollow breath of a dying girl, Princess Velith, daughter of Emperor Kelzar, once the embodiment of strength and flawless design, now lay pale and fading. Her skin, once aglow with the ethereal light of her kind, had dulled to the color of ash. The Empire's greatest minds, its brightest healers, had tried and failed. Their technology, their precision, their pride all useless in the face of something they refused to understand. Kelzar, conqueror of galaxies, stood beside her bed not as a ruler, but as a father. In his armor of gold and eyes of fire, he was still helpless. His fists were clenched, his mind racing through the numbers, the systems, the doctrines. But sickness doesn't obey titles, and perfection does not prepare you for helplessness. Her feet, the Empress knelt. Lady Anara, known for her silence and steel, wept openly. Zurans did not cry, but today, a mother did. She whispered through her tears, "We must seek help." The words felt like betrayal. And when she said, "From the humans," the court gasped, as if she had spoken a heresy older than their son. Humans were seen as less fragile bodies, brief lives, primitive souls. But desperation burns through prejudice. And as the Emperor looked into the eyes of the girl who once laughed beneath twin moons, he gave the order, "Bring the human." Dr. James Carter received the call far across the stars, in a lonely medical station above a dead moon. He had just finished stitching together the shattered bones of a soldier when the Empire reached out, not with respect, but with command. He was to come. Refusal was not an option. And so, with hands still stained by war, he boarded their royal shuttle. The palace that awaited him was made of fire and gold, every inch humming with contempt. He walked its halls like an ant in a dragon's den. They whispered as he passed. So small, so fragile. This is their healer? James ignored them all. He had buried more patients than they had ever dared to save. He had held death in his hands and dared it to wait. The Emperor stood tall before him, his voice colder than the void. "Save my daughter, or you will not leave this planet alive." James met his gaze and simply said, "I'll do my best." What he found in Velith was worse than he feared. Her body was crumbling from within. Not under attack but from betrayal. Not a pathogen. Not an enemy. But her own blood turning against her. The Zuran had perfected their biology into blindness. They could not see what he saw. But James did. He turned to the Emperor and said, "I know what's wrong." The court froze. Even time seemed to pause. "Then fix it," Kelzar commanded. But the cure would demand the one thing the Zuran had always denied: humility. The solution would not come from their archives or their pride. It would come from him, a human. James looked again at Velith, the girl lost between life and memory. "I can save her," he said, "but you have to trust me." And in that moment, the future of two species stood balanced on a whisper. The grand hall echoed with silence as James Carter's words hung in the air. "Trust me." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, ancient fire simmering behind gold. "You ask for trust from a race you insult by existing." His voice carried the weight of generations raised to believe that strength was in purity, that weakness lived in anything unlike themselves. James didn't blink. "Then why am I here?" he asked, not with defiance, but with tired truth. "You summoned me, not because you believe in me, but because you've run out of belief in yourselves." Kelzar said nothing. The court didn't move. T last. He spoke. "One chance. 1 week. If she dies, so do you." James nodded. Not as a man accepting doom, but as someone who'd stared into worse and walked out alive. He entered their medical archives, oceans of glowing symbols, impossible readings, elegant graphs crafted by minds sharpened beyond human years. It was brilliant, beautiful, and utterly blind. Perfection had made them careless. Their doctors had forgotten how to fail, and so they had forgotten how to learn. They saw symmetry, not sickness. James saw something else. He traced the breakdown in her cell's decay that moved like a quiet tide, eroding her from within. It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't war. It was time. A flaw buried so deep in her genetic code, her body didn't recognize it as a threat. She was collapsing under the weight of engineered perfection. James brought his findings before the court. They stood like statues, unmoved, unwilling. Your bodies were built to resist everything, he explained. But that design has made you blind to the very things that now destroy you. Murmurs rose like smoke. Blasphemy, they hissed. Weakness is a human word. James pointed at Velith's scans. Call it what you want. But if she dies, it won't be weakness. It'll be your pride. Then came the real fracture. I can fix it, James said, but I'll need to use human DNA to rebuild what's breaking inside her. The court erupted shouts, gasps, fury. Even the Empress, who had once begged for help, looked shaken. To mix Zuran blood with human genes was not science. It was heresy. One noble stepped forward, Dryeth, tall and venom-eyed. You suggest we corrupt our royal bloodline with impurity? James's voice didn't waver. I suggest you save your daughter. But he could already see the verdict in their eyes. Zurans did not yield. They endured. Even if it meant letting a princess die. He turned back to the Emperor. You must decide. Do you want your daughter alive, or your throne unchanged? Kelzar's eyes burned into him, cold and bright. 1 week, he said again. 1 chance. James bowed his head, not in submission but in readiness. Behind him, the walls of gold closed in. Before him, 7 days of war, with time, biology, and a civilization's arrogance. He wasn't here to survive. He was here to win. The doors sealed behind him like a prison. But James Carter didn't flinch. He had been trapped before on battlefields, in backwater clinics where failure meant death. This was just another war. The only difference was, this time, the enemy wore a crown. 7 days. That was the sentence. Save her, or vanish into the cold statistics of an empire that never spoke the names of the unworthy. He turned to his patient, to Velith, lying still beneath layers of sterile technology. Her breath came shallow. Her heart struggled to remember. Rhythm. The monitors painted a story of fading life, while the Empire painted a story of betrayal. He worked without rest. The serum he designed was delicate, crafted to patch the fractures in her DNA with carefully woven strands of human code. Not to replace what she was, but to teach her body to heal. To do what Zuran perfection had long forgotten. By the second day, whispers began to spread. Dryeth led them like a fire spreads wind. The human delays, he sneered. He hides behind machines while the princess dies. Lady Onara spoke against him, but her voice was no longer enough. The court smelled blood. James's, Velith's, and the pride they'd rather protect than truth. James ignored them. He watched Velith's vitals. Every shift, every fluctuation. The gene therapy had begun its silent battle inside her. Human cells reaching across an alien chasm, trying to hold together what even gods could not perfect. On the 4th day, everything broke. The serum failed. Her body rebelled. Monitors screamed. Her skin darkened. Her breathing cracked. James leapt into action, injecting counteragents, recalibrating enzymes, forcing the reaction to stabilize. Guards stormed in with weapons raised, shouting, accusing. But James never stopped moving. Then silence. She was alive, barely, and James had lost precious time. That night, as the halls darkened, something moved. A whisper in the air. He turned. Too late. A blade came for his throat. He dodged, barely, grabbing a tray, deflecting the strike. His attacker moved with inhuman speed, cloaked in black, face hidden. Why now? Why kill him when the clock already promised death? Then he understood. Someone wasn't willing to wait. He fought with desperation, not skill, because that's what humans do. They survive. He grabbed a sedative, drove it into the assassin's neck. Muscles locked. Silence returned. He pulled back the hood. Not a mercenary. Not an outsider. One of the Emperor's own guards. James stood, breathing heavy, fists clenched. He wasn't fighting disease anymore. He was fighting a belief system sharpened into a dagger. He walked straight to the throne room and said, "We're running out of time, and someone just tried to make sure I don't finish what I started." The Emperor's eyes were still. But Dryeth spoke first, a bold accusation. He said, smooth as oil. James gave him nothing, just a glare. "I'm not asking for justice. I'm asking for what it takes to win." The court gasped when he demanded more resources, more staff, more respect. "You have 2 days," Kelzar said at last. "And no more mistakes." James nodded. He would not make another, because now, it wasn't just Velith's life on the line. It was every future their pride tried to bury. The palace no longer felt like a monument. It felt like a coffin with too many eyes. James walked its golden corridors beneath the weight of glances sharp enough to draw blood. Guards watched him like a contagion. Nobles stared through him, hoping he would fail, praying they wouldn't have to admit he was right. 5 days had passed. Velith's condition had stabilized, but just barely. Her cells had stopped dying, that was all. She remained unconscious, trapped between life and death, her body trying to accept the genetic bridge he had built. But time was a knife against his throat, and then came the second blade. He slept beside her, only because exhaustion finally won. His body gave in, but his instincts didn't. Something moved. He rolled aside as a dagger punched into the cot where his head had been. Another assassin, silent, fast, deadly. This one didn't come to warn. This one came to finish. They fought. In the glow of pale machines, James blocked with whatever he could, grab trays, instruments, a chair. He moved with desperation again, because that's the only luxury humans have in battle, desperation, and the refusal to die. The assassin caught him by the throat, slammed him into the wall. James couldn't breathe, but even through blurred vision and failing strength, he fought back. A vial of muscle relaxant, a single chance. He drove it into the attacker's arm. The drug took hold, limbs seized, body locked. James slammed the assassin to the infirmary table and tore off the mask. Another palace guard, another trusted sword-turned-traitor. When the other guards arrived, weapons drawn, they saw James standing bruised but alive. And they saw their brother paralyzed beneath him. "I think it's obvious," James said. "Someone here wants me dead." No one argued. No one moved. He demanded they take him to the Emperor again. This time, he entered a court not of curiosity, but of fear. He threw the unconscious assassin before the throne. "One of your own," he said, "sent to kill the only man keeping your daughter alive." Dryeth's voice was poison smooth. "Perhaps they only sought to protect our bloodline from further contamination." James stepped forward. "She's alive because of me. And you hate that more than you love your own people." The Emperor's face didn't change, but his silence thundered. Then finally, "I do not tolerate betrayal." His eyes found Dryeth, cold, calculating. "I will find who did this," he said. James didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just said, "I need one more day." The Emperor gave a nod. One day, 24 hours to finish rewriting what a civilization believed was untouchable. James walked out of that court not as a doctor but as a hammer ready to shatter glass palaces. The final war hadn't come, but the first blow had just been struck. The palace walls whispered now. The whispers had changed. Where once there was mockery, now there was fear. The human had survived not one, but 2 assassination attempts, and the princess, though silent, still breathed. The nobles no longer spoke openly. They watched, calculating, waiting. The court had fractured, and James Carter was the crack running through their foundation. He returned to the infirmary knowing what it meant. This wasn't medicine anymore. This was ideology bleeding out through old wounds. Velith's pulse was stronger, her breathing steady, but she remained unconscious, trapped in a liminal space where biology had stabilized, but the soul had yet to return. The gene therapy worked. He could see the markers aligning, the scans brightening, but she didn't stir, and if she didn't wake, it would mean nothing. The Empire would declare it failure. And James would be another forgotten body, buried beneath ceremony and gold. So he made a choice, a Zuran neural stabilizer, a device built for warriors to reclaim thought after trauma. Not meant for this. Dangerous. But James had run out of safe options 3 days ago. He placed it gently at her temple. Whispered to no one, "If this works, you owe me a drink." The pulse began. Controlled. Precise. A T first. Nothing. Then the monitors spiked. Her fingers twitched. Then, suddenly her golden eyes flew open, wild and blazing, as if returning from a dream not meant for memory. She gasped, her entire body arching, breath seizing the air like it had forgotten how to exist. James removed the device. She looked at him, truly looked. Not a patient, not royalty, just a soul alive again. He exhaled. Not relief, not triumph, just stillness. Because this wasn't a miracle. This was earned, and the world would have to face it. When he stepped into the grand hall, the court had already gathered. Word had spread like fire through dry fields. James walked, flanked by silent guards. The Emperor sat motionless. "Is she alive?" he asked, voice devoid of hope or fear. James didn't speak. He just turned toward the doors. They opened, and Velith walked in. Gasps, shouts, eyes wide with awe, with denial, with everything they had buried behind tradition. She was pale, Yes, but upright, breathing, walking, living. Lady Honora wept without shame. The emperor stood, unblinking, watching his daughter cross the floor. Then he did the unthinkable. He knelt. The court froze. A god had bowed to a man. You have done what no Zuran could, Kelzar said. You have saved my daughter. James said nothing. The silence was louder than any declaration. Then, at last, the emperor spoke again. Ask your reward. James didn't pause. Let our people work together. Share medicine. Share knowledge. Don't let your pride kill what we can save. The court roared in protest. But James raised his voice above them all. I just saved your future. If that's not enough, then maybe I should have let her die. Silence. The emperor stared, unmoving, then nodded. So be it. James had won, but he didn't smile, because he knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Victory, they say, changes everything. But in Zuran halls carved by generations of pride, victory only changes what they allow it to. The court was split. Younger nobles whispered of possibilities, of human minds repairing alien flaws. But the old blood, the ones with power dripping from their veins like oil, saw James not as a savior but as a threat. Lord Dryeth did not rest. The venom in his eyes had only grown more patient. That night, a guard entered James's chamber. The man's face was carved from stone. You are being sent away, he said. James raised an eyebrow. I thought I earned a statue. The guard didn't blink. You've earned your life, that is all. The Emperor grants you safe passage, but Lord Dryeth demands your removal. You are to leave Zuran space, immediately. James didn't argue. He knew this court, knew these eyes. You don't get to rewrite an empire's beliefs and expect applause. He packed his things in silence, but as he turned to leave, footsteps stopped him. Velith, stronger now, clearer, golden eyes steady. This is not the last time we meet, she said. James smirked, tired. Make sure it was worth saving you. She handed him a small chip. This has everything. The data, the cure. Proof that Zuran and human genes can live as one. James took it. They said nothing more, because some truths are too large for words. He boarded the ship. Alone again, the sky above Zuran Prime shimmered in gold and violet as if the planet itself mourned. He had come with no invitation. He left with no legacy. But he had rewritten the ending of a life meant to die, and that was enough. Or so he thought. The ship's engines hummed like a quiet promise as James drifted into the void between stars. Alone, no cheers, no medals, just the quiet after chaos, and a heart too worn out to celebrate. He leaned back in his seat, watching hyperspace bend. Around him, he had saved a life, defied an empire, and pulled truth from the jaws of tradition. And in return, they had cast him out. His name was erased from their records, his presence scrubbed from their halls. So be it. He told himself it was enough. He told himself he would go back to simpler days, mending bones on outposts, healing miners burned in reactor fires, places where gratitude came in tired nods, not politics. But even as he said it, he knew he couldn't go back. A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. An encrypted signal pierced the silence. Curious, cautious, James opened the transmission. The projection bloomed in front of him. Velith, but not in robes of royalty. She stood in battle armor, regal and unyielding, surrounded not by courtiers, but by the quiet hum of a warship's command deck. James raised an eyebrow. I thought we said our goodbyes. Velith gave a faint smile. So did they. He sat up straighter, eyeing the fleet behind her. This isn't a courtesy call. Her expression sharpened. James, I need your help. He nodded slowly. Let me guess. Dryeth. She didn't deny it. They think that if I disappear, the Empire will have no choice but to follow them. James ran a hand through his hair. So the game never ends. No, she said. But I've changed. And not just politically. She explained how the genetic therapy had done more than heal. It had awakened something in her, sharpened her senses, strengthened her mind. Something inside her had evolved. She needed understanding. She needed him. You're the only one who can help me make sense of what's happening. He stared at her image, at the swirling stars behind her, at the unspoken war she was about to fight. If I say no? He asked. You walk away, free, no strings. You've earned that. He thought about silence, about rest, about hiding. But he didn't belong in silence. Not anymore. He smirked. Well, princess, you found a way to make exile interesting. She smiled. Sending coordinates. Meet me in deep space. The transmission cut, and James adjusted course. He was never meant to vanish. He was meant to return. The stars drifted past like distant witnesses as James cut through the void, guided by coordinates that defied every border, every treaty, every law that once chained him. He wasn't headed back to Zuran space, not exactly, but to the edge of its shadow where silence met ambition, and one spark could ignite a civil fire. Velith waited, not in hiding, but in motion. Her ship lean, black, and bristling with modifications was no palace. It was a rebellion in steel. She met him with fire in her step, power in her voice, but a weariness behind her eyes only James could see. This wasn't a princess anymore. This was a survivor building her own empire in the dark. They wasted no time. The genetic therapy had changed her, not just healed her. Strength surged in her limbs. Her thoughts came faster. Her senses were expanding beyond their design. Zuran biology, once pristine and rigid, had tasted something human, and it had evolved, but it came with risks: erratic neural spikes, surges of strength, changes no imperial doctor could explain. James ran tests in silence, analyzing, observing, and in the process, they began to see the truth. Velith was no longer Zuran in the way her people defined it. She was something else, and that terrified the old guard. She was the proof they wanted buried, the living rebuke to their myths of purity, and she knew it. "I'm not safe," she said one night, voice low. "And neither is anyone who believes what I've become proves a better future." James looked at her, remembering the walls of that golden court, the eyes that preferred death to change. "You're not fighting for a future," he said. "You are the future. That's why they want you gone." Velith turned to the stars beyond the viewport. "Then it's time they understand. I won't be erased." James didn't smile, because revolutions are never born in joy. They're born in necessity, and the war was coming, not of ships and weapons, but of ideas. Not all wars begin with banners. Some begin in silence, whispered across encrypted channels, carried in the eyes of those who once bowed but no longer believed. Velith's ship became a sanctuary for those who saw the truth. Young Zurans, curious scientists, outcast thinkers, those who had once sat in the Empire's gleaming halls but now felt the cold rot beneath their feet. They came in shadows, bearing questions no tradition could answer, and James became the answer they sought, not as a hero, but as proof. He spent his days studying Velith's transformation, cataloging the shifts in her genome, the neurological patterns that had begun to echo both human and Zuran frequencies. It was as if her body, once rigid and sculpted by generations of genetic doctrine, had begun to dream. Stronger reflexes, heightened perception, sharper memory, and something else, something unmeasurable, possibility. But as her power grew, so did the danger. Word spread. Dryeth and his allies had not disappeared. They had simply stepped into deeper shadows. The council had branded Velith a threat, a walking mutation, a breach in their holy design. Assassins returned, not lone daggers, but coordinated strikes. Each time, they failed, but each attempt left scars not on her body, but on her movement. Friends turned, allies vanished. James stayed, because the war wasn't about sides anymore. It was about what they chose to become. "You know they'll never accept this," Velith said quietly after another failed ambush. "No matter what proof we show, no matter how many lives we save, they don't need to accept it," James replied. "They just need to see it work." She watched him with something like hope. "You still believe in that?" He nodded. "I don't believe in systems. I believe in momentum, and you've already started it." That night, they transmitted the full research findings to secret channels across the Empire, disguised in trade reports, cloaked beneath cultural archives, slipped into databanks never meant to be read, not as an attack, but as a seed. And seeds, once planted, rarely stay buried. The final transmission left the ship like a whisper through the void, silent, small, and unstoppable. James watched it vanish into the darkness, not with triumph, but with quiet understanding. It would take time, years, perhaps lifetimes, but time was something humanity understood well. They didn't conquer with fleets. They endured. Velith stood beside him, no longer trembling beneath legacy, no longer afraid of the empire that once held her breath in its fist. She had changed, and in doing so, had broken something sacred to her people, but in breaking it, she had freed it. The council would send more. Of that there was no doubt. They would tighten their grip, cloak their fear in law, call resistance impurity. But they were too late. The truth was loose in the bloodstream of the Empire, and no doctrine could undo that. James prepared to leave again. The work wasn't finished, only changing shape. There were others now, other races, other empires, other broken codes that needed rewriting. Velith didn't ask him to stay. She only handed him back the data chip he'd once carried, now overridden with discoveries he hadn't dared imagine. "It's yours again," she said. "What you gave me, what it made of me, it's only the beginning." He took it without a word. They stood at the airlock, two figures from opposite ends of biology, belief, and history. Not lovers, not allies, something rarer, witnesses to each other's evolution. "You'll be hunted," James said. "I already am," she replied. "But now they're the ones afraid." A faint alarm pulsed. His ship was ready, engines hot, stars calling. He turned once more. "You ever need a doctor? I'll call," she said. Then added, "Next time, try not to get exiled." He laughed. For the first time in what felt like forever, he boarded. The hatch closed. The engines roared, and the stars took him. But somewhere, far behind, a princess who had once been dying now breathed the air of rebellion. A people that had once dismissed humanity now whispered his name in hidden corners, and a future, once bound by blood and pride, had been cracked open by a fragile hand. Dr. James Carter, exile, healer, heretic, was gone, but his cure was just beginning.